So in part 2 of this second lesson or second video, we're just going to create all of the dimensions tables that we want to see. So it's going to be pretty monotonous, but just to kind of show you what it takes. So, I think the first place to look is, okay, let's look at our data sets, our fact tables. We have all of these dimensions. We have all these dimensions. I'm calling them dimensions. You can call them columns, whatever you want, fields. We have all these columns. I got to ask myself, do I want to see actuals versus my forecast by product? If the answer is yes, I got to create a product dimension table. Do I want to see it by customer? If the answer is yes, I got to create a customer dimension table. Do I want to see actuals versus forecast by city? You get the idea. If the answer is yes, got to create a city dimension table. So if we look back, again, I've created all of these. Now, I'm gonna combine a little bit of what we learned last time and the mapping aspect of it, just to show you something here. So, when we forecast, if we look at our forecast, our countries are pretty clean. Australia, Brazil, we have the UK, but we don't also have the United Kingdom. And we have the USA, but we don't also have United States. But when we look at actuals, as we see a lot, the data integrity is not always the best. So we see AUS for Australia and Australia, and we see BR and Brazil, CH and China, ING and England, but we also have the UK, we have the United States, US, USA. You get the idea. So I've gone ahead and already mapped those, and we can see what it's like when we use the unmapped version versus the mapped version. But we also have the same thing with customer. So if we look at our customer forecast, we're obviously not going to forecast for Nike and Nike Inc. We're just going to forecast for Nike. And we're not going to forecast for Wade's shops and just Wade's. We're going to forecast for Wade's shops. But when we look at our actuals, what do we get? So we get a lot of different types of things. We have, that's the forecast again. So let's go to our actuals. So actuals, we see all kinds of things. We see Wade's shops. We see WS. We see Nike Inc., GC, Guitar Center. A lot of these, I'm just picking some of my favorite brands. So let you know a little bit about me. So I've already gone ahead and created those dimension tables, but I've also made the map for us. Don't think you need to watch me say, okay, let's look through all this. Say England, ENG is, we're going to call that the UK. So let's just bring in these pieces. So this is going to be, and I've already named these, this is going to be our product dimension table. So remember, we're going to have the source of all these dimensions just be in a tab in our spreadsheet called, we named it dimension. So let's just call this product. I want to make sure this is, dim product. Okay. So, and we're going to have a country dimension table because we want to see our data by country. We might have specific country leaders that want to see how they forecasted versus their actuals. And obviously customers. Oops. So again, I've already gone ahead and done all that mapping because it's boring to watch, very monotonous, but somebody's got to do it. So a lot of times, if this exists in your IT, if your company's IT infrastructure, where they are doing this data integrity cleanup, then you might be okay. And if you know SQL, you can pull in the cleaned up version. If you're a smaller business, you're probably going to get a lot of different naming conventions for customer or country or region, just to name a few. Okay, so similar to what we did last time, all we have to do is, since these are all tables, all we need to do is go to our PowerPivot tab at the top and click Add to Data Models. Let's start with product. So as soon as we add that, we see dim product there. And I'm going to go to the diagram view because that's the view I really like, because that's where all the magic happens, and it's just fun to see all these lines. But let's just bring them all in, and then we'll see what it looks like. So let's go to the next one. So let's do country. Let's just go add to data model. And again, just to reiterate, if you know SQL and you have a SQL server, you could probably pull this via SQL, but it shows up the same way. You just have to determine what, in SQL you got to decide which columns you're going to bring in the query. Okay, so then the last one is our customer dimension. So there we go. So these are all the dimensions that we have. So now what we do is literally we drag and drop. So we got the product, and we're going to do the product dimension. We're going to tie it to product number. Again, it's generally speaking a lot easier if you have numbers, because product, again, just like a country, could be called something else. It could be named something else, but you want to, hopefully the product number is the same. So let's do product number to product number. Let's do the same thing with our forecast. And I would say if it's not, let's say you have product number 1 is a soccer ball, and then product number 2 is soccer. Those may or may not be the same thing. You may want to call them the same thing. So all you would really do in that case is you'd make another column, and you could name that column whatever you wanted. You could say consolidated product or something and call them both soccer. So you have soccer ball, so you could see the dimension, you could see the actual values, the revenue forecast and actuals by soccer ball and soccer. But if you wanted to consolidate them to say, I just want to have a product grouping, you could even call it sports, then you could consolidate that. And we'll kind of get to that with customer. You see dim customer down there. Okay, so we've linked dim product. So let's link country. Okay, so let's do country to the country map, because again, we have BR and Brazil, we have USA and US. We're going to map that to country. Okay, and then finally our customer. So we're going to link customer number. To kind of illustrate what I was talking about just barely, if you look at our customer, we have something called industry here. So look at our dimension table, we have industry. But let's go back to our tables themselves, and let's look at our actuals table. We don't have any columns or dimensions called industry. We don't have it in actuals, we don't have it in forecast. However, we have the ability, and this is the nice thing about PowerPivot and data modeling in this way, is that we have the ability to say, to add any number of fields or dimensions onto our tables. So in this particular case, it's an easy one. We have our customers. We want to know what industry, or in some places it's called vertical. We want to know what industries our customers operate in. So that is certainly independent of the data that we get. Whether the data we get in has, $1 million for Nike or $1 for Nike, it doesn't necessarily have to say industry. If we already know our customers and what industry we want to put them in. So we don't have to have an industry field in our fact tables. Now we could maybe we wanted to combine these countries. Obviously, look, I put region again. I wonder why I did that, because I already have a region map. Well, I found in my experience that sometimes all the mapping is not always straightforward. So I've remapped these. But let's say I wanted to, put a grouping here on country for the language. So the USA, I would, the main language, I'd say English. In Canada, it's English. In Hungary, I'd put Hungarian. Because maybe I have products that would cater to a particular language. And so I could group the countries And even though in our fact tables, we don't have anything that talks about language, but I know that certain countries, probably have a main language. So if I had a product, for example, that spoke that targeted certain languages, that might be nice data to have. And so I'm trying to highlight that you don't have to have all of the data in your data set, as long as you can group your dimensions in some way. Then you can essentially add any number of cuts of data or slices of data. So as we go back to our model, to see all this in action, we now have the ability to say, well, let's see how our customers did. I don't really care about region right now. Let's look at our customer. Okay. So we can see our forecast versus our actuals, and maybe let's just something like this. That's how I see it better. Forecast and our actuals didn't do very well. Okay. So we can see all this and say, you know what, I don't care about customer. Actually, you know what? Let's bring in this industry. Since I know what industry my customers are in, I can add that to my dimension table, even though that doesn't exist in any of my data sets. I can look and say, okay, all-purpose companies. All right. Okay. Now, this can bring up any number of questions. Okay. All right. Am I hitting my forecast anywhere? Doesn't look like it. But am I really struggling somewhere? Okay, maybe I'm really struggling in electronics. My electronics business is not doing well. Why? So it allows you to ask different questions. So that, I hope, shows the power of building this model in the back end and bringing in these dimensions that, again, what we've done, if we go to our model here, and that's why I really like the diagram view, is before we had two discrete data sets. We had our actuals and we had our forecast. The old way of looking at this was to do any number of VLOOKUPs to try to compare these two data sets, but not robust and it's prone to error. But now we've added it to PowerPivot, and we have created this model on the back end that can really, we could bring in any number of dimensions here, as long as we are able to tie it to each of these, to each of our fact tables. And if we added another fact table for, let's say, updated forecast, we would similarly, if we wanted to see country across our actuals, our forecast, and our updated forecast, should we make one, we would have to have country in that updated forecast. If not, this essentially becomes a useless dimension if we want to see that dimension across all of our fact tables. So very powerful stuff in modeling. And by doing this, you no longer have to worry about, oh, well, is there a hard-coded number in here somewhere? It's all kind of like magic. But that ends lesson number 2.